Tonight we'll be going over our 2023-24 budget. We'll actually be looking at the mayor's recommendations. And before we start, there's a couple things that I want to repeat. First of all, and our attorney mentioned it the other day, and I thought I saw Nick go through, but basically there is if you have a conflict of interest, and basically you're voting, you are not to vote on an issue that would put money into your household. And by that I mean your wife, yourself, whoever you reside with. Now, having said that, what we have done in the past is you can say that by, I have a conflict, or you can simply say Rule 10. And when you say Rule 10, it's understood that you have a conflict and you will not be voting on that particular issue. However, you can vote on the budget as a whole. Just because you can't vote on that one particular issue does not keep you from being able to vote on the rest of the budget here. Now, the second thing that I wanted to talk about, and this I'll need the approval of the committee, is what we've done for the last several years and seems to speed the process up a lot. Our goal tonight is to start looking at the mayor's recommendation. He's been working with the different agencies out here and trying to decide what the budget is. Now, our job is to review it, and if we agree with that, then we're going to approve the mayor's recommendation, or if we don't approve of his recommendation, we want to add to it or take away, then we would make a motion and get it seconded and voted on to do that. And what we've done to speed the process up in the past is if no one has a problem with the mayor's recommendation, we will accept the mayor's recommendation as our committee having approved it. That way we will not have to go through the process of a vote on every issue if there's no changes made. Now, that's not to say any of you out there, any of you of us, or you six, can make a motion to amend what the mayor's recommendation is. You can say, I want to take this out, I want to add this to it. So if I'm clear on that. And I'm going to ask for a vote on that well, first of all, I'll ask for a recommendation from our committee if that's okay. And I'll need a motion and a second on that. Okay, I have a motion, Vice Chairman.
Second.
And a second, Chairman Gooch. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So as long as we approve the mayor's recommendations, there will not be a vote. It will automatically be added to this committee's approved recommendations too. Now, I don't think we have any minutes to approve tonight, do we, Mark? We'll do that at our next regular meeting. So the first order of business tonight is, the first department is the Board of Equalization. And if you don't mind, come forward, state your name and your position as we have been doing recently.
My name is Rob Mitchell. I'm the assessor of property for Rutherford County, Tennessee. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My request for or recommendation for the Board of Equalization budget is $47,336, and the mayor concurs with that, so I think we're fine on that one unless you have any specific questions.
Commissioner Johnson. I'm sorry, this is on tab 2, first page. Yeah,
tab 2, page 1, Board of Equalization.
Let's see, could I ask a question?
You're recognized.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. This on the Board of Equalization, it's I guess 308. There's a $20,000.
Yes, sir.
Built into there, and I think we had a discussion, and there was even a resolution earlier in the year to bump that number up. And I was curious, is that the total amount that we have to challenge or to respond to challenges or to apply to challenges that for folks that basically file claims for relief or whatever, something along those lines? Is that what that is?
Yes, sir. The $20,000 in line 51-210-308 is the defense budget for all county appeals evaluation, which would be anything from a Nissan appeal with their appeal with values to big box retailers who appeal their values with us, to commercial units, to apartment complexes, to hotels and motels. So that's our total allocated amount for defense of property tax appeals.
I have a question I want to interject first, and I should have mentioned this. Normally, we will ask applicant if you agree or disagree with the mayor's recommendation, and I'll ask you that now.
I concur.
Okay. Back to you, Commissioner.
Can you quantify the challenge that you face in connection with that? Because you're basically up against a bunch of plaintiffs' lawyers trying to sort that out. And I'm trying to kind of do a quick assessment. What would additional funds do or not do? Is this adequately funded? Can you give me a sense for from your perspective and for what other counties are doing?
I did ask other counties what their budgets were. Knox County has a budget of $250,000 for valuation appeals. The Hamilton County assessor, they have an entire department at the county level. They have a county attorney that has a budget of $1.3 million, and they simply turn their appeals over to the county attorney. And then through the county attorney's office, if they need to hire a specialist, they hire the specialist, and the county attorney's office processes the expenses for their office. That's a similar way that they do it in Williamson County. Williamson County has an in-house attorney that handles that. Metropolitan Nashville has an entire legal department that handles that. Plus, they have 2 attorneys on staff, and one of them is a former judge. The Shelby County Assessor's Office has 3 attorneys on their assessor's staff, plus their county attorney that handles their appeal defense. So we're getting to be the size counties that where we do a great job with what it is that we have to fight with. It's difficult to quantify a negative, because when it comes time to appeal, we're fighting to retain a value that's been put on the books already, and we're fighting against the return of property tax dollars at that point. So the actual return is, our values are good, our values are quantifiable, they're verified by the state, but there's a profit incentive in there for the tax attorneys that come in to process these, because they work on a commission basis. They get paid out of the refunds. So when you have every Lowe's or Home Depot in the state of Tennessee that's under appeal, and they do them en masse every single year, and it takes sometimes 1 to 2 years before it's ever adjudicated before an administrative judge, the interest accrued on it accrues to the county, and the county has to pay that back with interest. So that's their profit motive in it. Currently, the statutory tax rate is 2% below prime, which puts it, and Michael, correct me, I don't keep up with it a whole lot, but I think it's what, prime is around 8%, 7 or 8%, so that would put everything that's accrued that we have to pay back, that we're paying interest on, at 6% that we're going to have to pay back to them. So Rutherford County is being used as a bank for these large corporations. And we fight to defend that because we don't believe it's valid and it shouldn't happen.
Excuse me a second. Michael,
You asked a question, I want to clarify something. We do have, on the next budget you're going to hear, there's an additional $15,000 for appeals defense, and then we also have an additional $70,000 for legal services set aside for that. And then two other things I want to point out to this. We do take into account, we do have somebody that's under appeal right now. That is taken into account on a conservative approach. And this year, one of the larger corporations under appeal has yet to pay their property taxes. So we would not be subject to paying the fee, I guess, the interest back to them. So we are conservative in that approach. But there is an additional 15 set aside for appeals defense in the next budget you're going to hear. And then we have an additional $70,000 set aside for legal services.
Is that under the county attorney? Is that part of that under the county?
The mayor's budget has $70,000 set aside for legal services.
Oh, okay,
And then
okay.
the reappraisal budget, which is 52,310, which you'll hear next, has an additional $15,000 set aside for appeals defense.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, that's great to know. I didn't know we had $70,000 for legal we could go to, so that's good to know.
are there any other questions from any other members of the committee on the Board of Equalization mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, we're ready to move on to the next one, and we will add that to our approved our recommendations from this committee. Next is the reappraisal budget.
The next budget that we have is budget 52,310, and that is the reappraisal budget. This is the budget that is cost shared with every municipality, so the effective cost to the citizens is roughly 1/3 of this once we get the money reimbursed from the cities for their portion. The request that I'm fine with it. The only difference in it was we had requested some money for vehicles that we had two go down last year. Most of our vehicles, so the newest we have besides one that we got on a lease to replace the two that were totaled out are 2014, but we're fine. So I concur with the mayor's recommendation at 3.603,799. $779, sorry. New glasses.
Quick question, the property assessor has a separate budget. Is this a transition, or is this, what is the separate?
We used to have two budgets, and that was an administrative convenience for more than anything else, because the counties used to get a grant from the state of Tennessee for the operation and conducting of the reappraisal budget. So the county created, instead of receiving it into the property assessor's budget, they created a separate reappraisal budget to have an accounting format that they could import those numbers into, was what I was told, is what Lisa told me.
That's correct, and the reason it's still in there is if you'll notice there's actual data in there from FY22, so next year it will not be in there.
Thank you.
Do I hear any more questions or recommendations from the committee? If not, we're going to...
Wait. On line 451, uniforms. What type of uniforms do y'all wear?
451 uniforms,
Huh?
that's for shirts, pants, jackets in the cold weather when they go out, so that people know that it's kind of like the maintenance office. When our folks go out to people's homes, they know that they're part of county government and what office they're with.
All right, thank you.
Do I hear any recommendations to change the mayor's recommendation? Hearing none, we're going to mark that one down as approved by the committee and move on to our next one, which is human resource.
Great, thank you very much.
Rob.
Evening. And I accept the mayor's recommendation. We have gone over human resources budgets and the things that we have. The biggest increase that we have is for all of the assessments and the testing that we'll have to do for the new employees for our public health and safety buildings, for fire, sheriff's office, and ambulance service. So the testing lines go up, especially for the firefighters. Their physicals are pretty intensive and they're pretty expensive. So the bulk of the increase of my budget is for those items.
This is Sonia Stevenson, who's the director of our HR department.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just went to talking. I apologize.
Are there any questions from the committee? If you- Coach?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On 399, other contracted services, talk about that.
Yeah, so Max Shred is the company who comes and shreds our confidential documents on location. So that's in this line item. And then also, my benefits channel is not only our Smart Hire system, which does our online applications processes, but it's also our HRIS system, our Human Resource Information System, where we maintain personnel files. We do trainings through those. We have lots of modules that we can use for training and for surveys, special events, but primarily it is the location where we put the personnel files that then, when Insurance and Risk Management, when Mr. Elam presents his budget, we both went with the same program so that when they were hired or separated in the county system, that it would go straight to insurance and also to payroll, so that trying to streamline the processes where there's not as much room for human error because it's already put into the computer system and then it feeds into their systems. So.
Well, I noticed that in 2022, I guess it went from 34,000 to 20,000 and then 30,000. Is there any, I guess, what's the reason for it going up 10,000 from last year?
One of the things is the system that to put all of our records electronically in there. Right now, we've been putting the records in there since we purchased this system, which was back in 2017-ish. 2020, we started adding all the records. The whole goal is that any of our constitutional officers or our department heads, any of the constitutional officers that uses our department and the department heads could sit at their desk and pull up their employees' personnel files. So we are in the process of scanning the records, putting those records into that system. Before I came, we only had paper records, and so with just a small office, we have tried over the years to try to get all those scanned and put in, but it's just a task bigger than we can handle.
I guess two other things that like you had quite a bit of an increase would be office supplies and other charges, $599.
Yeah, the other charge is $599. What number do you have on yours?
49,500 is the
40,000, yeah, 40, almost 50,000.
For $499, for $599?
$599, 49,500.
Okay, I'm not sure.
Sonia, that's got the security equipment in there.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So that is a potential for a security system for the HR department.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
recognized.
Sonia,
Yes, sir.
322 evaluation and testing. I noticed that's almost doubled.
That is for what I just mentioned, for the fire, ambulance, and the sheriff's office for the new public health and safety buildings. All of those new employees will have to have physicals, MMPIs, background checks, drug screens, those type things. And so that's, the majority of that is for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing I should have asked when we started, the mayor has a recommendation for raises. Are those raises in this recommendation? Okay, so we won't be seeing that later, an increase in it,
Okay.
unless we change it. What exactly was the figure?
So if you notice on your budget book, on the header page for the general fund and on every fund, the 3.25% lift to the table is included in the mayor's recommendation. That is included in the book in front of you. But it's a 3.25% lift to the table. Correct.
If they're due a step, that would be a total of 5.
Very similar to the way y'all did it last year, where I think y'all raised the table 13. Sonia, correct me if I'm wrong, it was either 13 or 13.25 last year, but very similar to that.
I just wanted to make sure they were already in there.
Correct.
We wouldn't be looking at that again. All right. thank you.
Correct, and I'm going to point out one thing while we're on here, two things, and I should have pointed this out, so I apologize. Our pension rate went up, if y'all remember that, so you're going to see that an increase in everybody's budget. It went up almost 1%. Well, that's 1% on $70 or $80 million worth of payroll, so that's going to be increase in everybody's budget. The other thing that I should have pointed out is you're going to see an estimate in budget current year 2023, and I got this question earlier and should have pointed out, that's as of April 30th. That's the current year as of April 30th. So I apologize for not pointing that out earlier.
Commissioner,
And so, Sonia, I think if I remember correctly, you said the evaluation and testing was due to the new public safety buildings coming
That's
to all of the new hires as far as public safety.
That's the primary reason. That line item does the testing for all of our employees. Any new hires that we have, it's their background checks, their drug test. But I've also added in, subject to the commission approving those positions for those buildings, I've calculated what the cost would be for them to have, so, because like a firefighter physical is pretty intense. They've got to go into a burning building. We want to make sure their lung capacity and all these other things are safe for them to do that. So their physicals are really like $1,200 a piece. So those are pretty expensive for those to have those. And so that's included in there. Our law enforcement and corrections employees have to have MMPIs, which shows their psychological evaluations. So those are included in that as well.
Did you say that the physicals were $1,200?
Only for fire. The rest of them are like $75. But the under the Brady bill that the state of Tennessee approved several years ago, there's a special requirement for firefighters, and it's a screening for cancer, a pre-screening for cancer. So you set your baseline when they're hired, and that physical is pretty expensive because it's very intensive. It goes over everything to make sure that they're physically fit to go into a burning building.
I understand. The reason I'm asking all these questions, I've noticed that the budget is about 14% higher than the amended budget from last year. And I was just looking at making sure that, I guess, you and the mayor looked at everything that, on their big increases that
Yeah, the big
are absolutely necessary.
that line item was like $60,000, I think $60,000 more. Last year we budgeted $90,000 and we ended up only using $55,000. We have a program in place. It's a reimbursement agreement. So anybody who quits the county within their first, before their 1 year is up, has to reimburse for all their new hire cost. And so that helped us save about $35,000 last year by doing that. Because if they don't stay for a year, then they have to reimburse. You know, the taxpayers shouldn't have to pay if they're not going to stay and keep their jobs. So we have a reimbursement agreement that they have to sign.
On
I've got on that line item as well, the reason it went up so much is we have consolidated that. What Sonia did mention was we've consolidated that. Right now, we're billing other departments, and we brought a budget amendment earlier this year for that. So one of the reasons, too, is we're pulling it out of some of the other departments and trying to put it in a central location. So it's not all just the public health and safety employees. So this year, we took an amendment for $9,000 to change from the sheriff's office to Sonia's budget, and we may have to take one at the end of the year. But we've tried to consolidate that to one spot because Sonia's office gets the bill. So that's the other reason that went up more than normal, more than above just the additional new employees.
So that's something that we may see less in someone else's budget.
Correct.
And just my understanding, on the current year, the estimate, I guess that's estimate and budget current year, what month does that go up to?
So it's really not an estimate. That's current as of April 30th, as of 2 Fridays ago, as of April 30th.
So all
it's
of
just-
this is be April 30th?
Correct. Every column on every fund that you see where it says estimate budget current year, that's just the way the system prints it out. But those are numbers as of April 30th. Those will continue to go up through the end of the year. So they still need 2 more months on top of what's there.
Well, and I guess in this case, so basically the end of April, that means we got May, June, 2 more months. It's right at 600,000, which is almost $240,000 less. And so do we think we're going to do that in 2 months?
I do think that I don't think we'll spend that for the next 2 months. However, we do budget that every position's full the entire time. We budget for the worst case. So, no, I do think I would have to look and see what we spend per month in that category. I mean, I think we'll definitely add quite a bit more, but will we hit the full 200? No, I don't think so. But like I said, looking through here exactly at her numbers.
Is this a methodology transition, I wonder? That's causing the difference in the 240? The consolidation occurring as of July 1st, for example?
Well, and that could be.
I'm just asking. I don't.
But that could be an example of, you know.
So what you're asking is, yes, she's spent 600,000 approximately as of April 30th, and her budget is 722.
That's 122,000.
So yes, she will get pretty close to that. Very, very close to that, yes.
But and this is for any budget. Whatever they don't get close to that could be an example of any fund balance.
Yes, that will
be
help.
higher than what we.
Yes, it will help. Like, for example, our current deficit, I believe right now is 28 or 29 million in the general fund. So yes, it would lower that, because we use the word budget deficit because that's what it is. Our actual will be much less than that, yes.
Ms. Stevenson, for the next 2 months, beans and rice, beans and rice.
Oh,
Well, her
Yes, sir.
current run rate to the end of this fiscal year would be $715,000, so it would be marginally under that, so.
Gentlemen, anybody else have any questions for Sonia, Commissioner Johnson?
So basically, what's driving this is the new employees that are coming on, training, and the additional training for the current employees.
the majority of it is, yes.
Thank you.
Do I hear any recommendations to change the mayor's budget? If not, or any more questions? Okay, we're going to also consider this budget approved by this committee and move on to the county attorney. Thank you, Sonia.
Good evening, Commissioners. Nick Christensen with the County Attorney's Office. The mayor's recommendation, accept that fully. It's in line with the legal services agreement that the county has with us, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Chairman,
Chairman Harris.
how much work did we had to bid out to other attorneys? I know we had one with a software lawsuit that we've had to use outside. How many of those have we done?
I don't have the monetary figures, but there is that patent infringement case from a few years ago that is still pending involving the sheriff's office, and we have an outside lawyer for that. So that's number one, which, by the way, that lawyer was successful in getting that case dismissed against the county. However, it's on appeal to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals right now. And then earlier this year, the commission wanted to have a outside environmental lawyer assist the county with various issues that it's dealing with. So that would be two. That work is infrequent from that lawyer, and so it's not a substantial cost. And then the third, to which the county is actually not paying any upfront fees for, is the county hired an outside litigator to pursue the county's excess insurance carrier in regards to an insurance provision dispute related to the class action lawsuit. So over the course of 4 years or so, there's been 3 instances, and I've thought that necessary and presented to the commission because those particular areas are very niche, very specialized, and require a little bit extra guidance, but I have been quarterbacking that and monitoring those lawyers.
Mr. Johnson?
Okay, Nick, I guess that would be covered under 331 other legal services, correct?
No. So the fees that I just described for those other lawyers that are outside of the county, those are separate and apart for this. Those fees that you see there are for all the other work that our office does for the county.
Well, it's not that large of an increase from what has already been amended budget from 103 this year.
Yes, sir. The agreement with our office specifies that there will be an annual increase every year commensurate with the increase in state employee compensation that's certified by the state finance department, so that we have a specific number that can be tracked. And we thought, I think both sides thought it fair to connect it to what the state is increasing for the state employee compensation. So that's what that reflects.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Irvin?
I was trying to, is there a place that pulls together all the legal fees, that the 3 that you mentioned, any additional legal fees? Because I understand, or if you could give us a thumbnail on how the arrangement works, just a thumbnail.
Sure, and I might need the assistance of your finance director here. I think each case is somewhat individualized in particular because these 3 outside counsel, mind you, one of them is not charging us any fees, and I forgot to expound upon that, but that individual is working on a contingency basis. But the other 2 lawyers, whenever there's work necessary in the case, they send us legal bills. And one thing I forgot to mention on the patent case, early on in the matter, it involved software that the sheriff's office was utilizing from a third-party vendor. And once the sheriff's office got sued, we didn't think we did anything wrong because we were just using software, and we got looped into this lawsuit. And so I negotiated with the third-party vending company to arrange an indemnification agreement to have them pay all of our patent lawyers' fees. And I will tell you, those fees are substantial. Patent law is very, very specialized, and the lawyer is out of Nashville at a very big law firm, and so his hourly rate is very high. But we were able to negotiate the third-party vendor because it's in their best interest to defend the patent lawsuit, because if their patent gets invalidated, or rather if the other side's patent gets invalidated and we win, that's good for the third-party vending company because they can go out and distribute their software that's no longer infringing across the country. So we actually haven't incurred any fees on that matter. The only one that there have been actual outside counsel fees incurred is for the environmental litigator that the county hired last year. And Michael, that might be under $15,000 at this point. I'm not
As of today, we've spent $23,040.90. That is going to be reflected in the Fund 116 Solid Waste Fund that you will see later on this evening.
So those 3 plus the amount under the county attorney is the total legal fees?
that I'm aware of. Yes,
So-
sir.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure, and then,
I'm gonna-
but there is one in the mayor's, I think,
Correct.
too.
So I want to clarify something here. Under the county attorney's contract, resolutions, copies, research, all of that is the legal services that are in the county attorney's budget. His litigation for where he represents for pause,
Yes.
anything, I think, any of the pending litigation that he reports on to steering when he's in court, correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of the way I view it, that's going to be under a legal services fee under the mayor's budget.
Yeah,
Not as
just
part of
to-
this.
Under where, I'm sorry?
Under the county mayor's budget, or county
there-
mayor's category, I guess
The
you could say.
county sometimes gets sued. It's inevitable, being as large as the county is. And also the county has to enforce its ordinances against infringers, violators. And so for that, part of the agreement with us is if there's a separate litigation invoice that goes out for those particular matters at a substantially reduced hourly rate.
Okay, so county attorney plus the 3 plus the mayor's budget is all the legal fees for the county.
And the only addition, there's one or two additional spinoffs. If we close a bond deal, which we will here shortly in the next few months, that will, they do that for us. They do a property closing for us. That bond deal would be in a different fund or a different location than here, which again is on a every time we issue debt.
Those are infrequent, though.
There could be some potential litigation for like a property and casualty suit. That could potentially be in our self-insurance fund, which would not be reflected here. But those are all dependent upon circumstances. And they're not regular monthly bills or fees that we would pay. They would be kind of one-offs.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I might make a suggestion that our finance director give us a report at the end of the year and bundle all these together. That way we can say, here's the amount, say August, something like that after. Well, you're going to be pretty busy in August, but, you know, as soon as you get a breather there, give us those totals. Okay, are there any other questions on specific to the county attorney's request here and the mayor's recommendation? Hearing no recommendations for a change, we're going to also add this to our approval budget. And before you leave, Nick,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to get you to do a little better job than I did on the conflict of interest.
I will do. I don't have my folders in front of me, but I'll do my best. So under state law, it says that if a commission member has a direct conflict of interest, which means if you have, if you were set to gain any increase in monetary compensation or benefit, so if there's an increase in sort of benefit coverage that you yourself would receive, say if you are an employee of the county, and or if your spouse were to receive, if they were an employee of the county or the Board of Education, then you are not to vote on that matter, okay? And if you do have that kind of interest, you can't vote on the matter, or you can't declare Rule 10 and then go ahead and vote on it. You just can't vote on that specific line item, okay? But when it comes to the overall budget appropriation come the end of June, even if you've got that direct conflict of interest that you haven't voted on in the specific line item, you can vote on the overall budget package. And in fact, I'd encourage you to do that because it's important that the county pass a budget and do the tax levy. So if you have individualized questions as the issues come up, feel free to call my office. Happy to speak to you about your individualized circumstances.
So basically, as a retiree, I can't vote on anything as far as dealing with risk management.
If the matter is to
Because
increase your retirement benefits,
I don't have any retirement benefits from the county. The only thing I have is insurance coverage.
that would be an insurance benefit to you. So as a
would be
retiree, you have insurance benefits through the county, right?
That would be a conflict.
It could be perceived as a conflict, so you might be better off to not vote on the particular matter and abstain from it. But when it comes to the overall budget appropriation in June that accounts for the increased insurance costs related to that coverage, you can go ahead and vote on that.
Well, I saved the county a wad of money by not being able to apply for TCRS because I'm a member through the state. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Nick, we're going to go ahead and call the Election Commission is next.
Alan Farley, Administrative Elections. Good evening. The Election Commission has passed our budget and also met with the mayor and accept the mayor's recommendation. Our budget does reflect the presidential election year, which will show an increase in postage and in labor, which is reimbursed by the state. 305,000 of this budget of mine, of the 1.2 million, is reimbursed by the state because of the presidential preference primary. That is a state election, so that's the only election that we do get reimbursed by the state. So
Is it already in here? Are the numbers already in here?
pardon?
Are the numbers already built into this budget?
The reimbursement.
Yeah, the reimbursement would be any monies that are spent on the March presidential primary, election workers, legal notices, postage, and all that. So that's part of our normal budget. We will take that cost that's been spent and submit it for reimbursement and get back from the state.
Mr. Chairman, just curiosity, last budget year is when we purchased quite a few new voting machines. Did that replace all of what was current voting machines?
Correct.
Okay, and how many was that roughly?
We purchased 340, and so it was an increase of 50 of what we currently have, but it's 340, so it replaced, so we'll have, in this budget year, we haven't received them yet, but this budget year, through a grant through the Secretary of State's office, we'll have replaced all of our machines, plus purchase an additional 50.
Okay. And how is that different than the ones we have now? My understanding, it leaves some kind of a paper trail for
Correct.
recounts or...
There's what they call a verified paper audit trail. So when you go through and you cast your ballot before you actually hit confirm your vote, it will show on a paper, it will actually list out the people that you cast your vote for. So if you agree with that, so that when you hit the red button, it will actually confirm that vote. So the voter gets verification, but then also too, if there's an audit, if we have to go back and audit through a recount or a contested election, then we can go back and pull that, and that's actually a paper record for audit purposes.
Mr. Farley?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain in this budget process, when we have an election, a countywide election, cities, incorporated areas have elections within our election process as it relates to city elections. How do we handle that? Do they handle their own budgetary items? I know that voting machines and all that kind of stuff belong to us, but how do we handle that?
If you recall, a few years back, Murfreesboro used to have a standalone election. Well, they were responsible 100% of those costs. So when they changed their charter to go to an August election, which is a county general and state and federal primary, all of that expense is incurred as part of our normal operating budget because we're holding a county and state election, which the county statutorily is responsible for paying. So the municipalities do not share in any of those expenses.
So we pay?
Correct. And just like with the PPP, the presidential election, it's a federal election which the state pays for, but traditionally we would have a May election, but in the presidential year it always moves to a March election. So that way we piggyback on state and federal reimbursement, so they pay for that election.
It makes a lot of sense. City employees are, city residents are county residents as well and pay county taxes, and I understand all that. If we had a special election, like a referendum, if we called for a referendum, it would not be included in your budget and would have to set aside extra funds to do that, correct?
Yes, sir. This budget has not prepared for anything other than our statutorily required elections.
Wouldn't expect you to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from committee? Chairman Harris.
I'm just curious, thinking on what he just said, how much would it cost to do a referendum?
There's a lot of requirements that would go into that, cost associated depending on what the call was, the cost of early voting, the amount of locations you wanted, the cost of labor. So there's some variables in there. If you based it just off of what our current structure, countywide structure would be, I would say it would probably be in the 100 to 125,000 range. And that's just a ballpark without really putting a pencil to it.
Any more questions for Farley? Hearing none and hearing no recommendations, we will consider this budget approved by this committee and move on to the next one, which
Thank you.
is Register of Deeds. Thank you, Mr. Farley.
I'm Heather Dahlbarn, your Register of Deeds in Rutherford County, and the mayor and I have met, and we've come to an agreement on our budget. I also have the distinct pleasure of being the first constitutional fee officer to present. So what I wanted to explain, and I did this year in the far column of my thing, was that we generate fees and we generate revenue for Rutherford County. Every one of our expenses are paid with those fees, and our excess is turned over to County General. So on the side there, you'll see, in the explanation, you'll see, I don't know, they don't have that? Okay, yours looks a little different, so you don't have that information. But what I had done this year a little differently is I'm making sure that as many of my expenses come out of my electronic data processing fee, which is restricted for the use of the register only. And so I've put as many line items as I can into that so that there'll be more excess fees to turn over to County General. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Chairman Harris.
Ms. Dahlberg, how many employees do you have?
13.
Did you grow your budget any more, or are you 13 last year, 13 this year?
13 last year with one open position. I closed that open position this year. We're using cross-training and enhanced technologies to reduce. When I started in 2010, we had 16 employees.
Ms. Dahlberg, if you could explain, a lot of folks who don't have a grasp of what a fee office really does. Why are you considered a fee office, and what is the cost to the taxpayer to run your office?
Technically, the average taxpayer doesn't have a cost with the Register of Deeds office. Only those who utilize the services of the office would have any input into the expenses of the office. The fees, we collect the state mortgage and transfer tax for the state, and for that we receive a commission, and the statute allows us to, actually mandates us to charge fees for recording. So all of those fees combined pay all of the expenses, and then we generate revenue for the county. So the office is completely self-sufficient and brings revenue to Rutherford County.
So basically, every transaction that comes out of your office is paid by the individual. It's not a burden on the county.
None. The average taxpayer does not. It's your whoever's transferring property back or forth.
That's the simplest way to put it.
Yes.
Hasn't it been a long time since your fees were increased?
It has been quite a while. Not since I've been in office have we had a fee increase, and much prior to, there hasn't been. I know I've had a lot of conversations recently with the local developers, realtors, homeowners associations. Everyone's a little bit concerned about impact fees increasing. City mayors have been calling and asking me questions as to, things I can see. I will say the registrar's office only gets 2.4% commission. In statute, it was initially 5%. At sometime during the Bredesen years, they took 2.6. So it said the statute reads the register gets 5%, but must remit 2.6% back to the state. We've tried, when I was president of the association in 2014, and every year since, we have tried to get that commission back. And we've gone to this commission, actually, years ago. I had you all vote on a resolution. We got the mayors all to support us. It gets there, we get through the bill, and then it hits fiscal review and it dies. It's too large of a fiscal impact. The legislative body does not have the authority to approve such a increase. They don't have the budget to do so. It would have to go into the governor's budget for that to be returned to 5% like it was originally. So that kind of is one avenue of revenue that we haven't been able to be successful in. Several times this body has reviewed looking at charging a county mortgage and transfer tax, because the mortgage and transfer tax I collect is for the state. And it's a significant amount of money, $20 million last fiscal year to the state from Rutherford County. And Rutherford County got $640-some thousand commission for doing that. When we had done that in Rutherford County in the past, I did some historical research on that. Unfortunately, that was back in the 80s. Unfortunately, it was deemed unconstitutional, and all those monies had to be returned. So that's a no-go unless you go into the state. You couldn't do it as Rutherford County. You could do it as a state, but that would have to be an amendment to the state constitution, and that's pretty radical for that. The next one is, and I will be actually at a conference later this month with the Registers Association, Knox County, myself, and Williamson County. We've been kind of working with trying to research, well, several other counties too, but predictable fees, or what they, a lot of people have heard as flat fees, which would change, instead of per page, you would have this document's going to be $35 to record. It doesn't matter how many pages. The users like that because at closing they may have a page come in or a page go out, and they have to change their fees at the last minute, and their truth in lending statements aren't correct. So there's been some support for that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of research to do that if you went that route, you might hurt a smaller county's revenue, or you might hurt a larger county's revenue, depending on that. So we're doing a lot of research on that right now, and that might be a route to increase revenues. But as far as Rutherford County's Registrar's Office, it's really streamlined. What has helped tremendously is the efficient use of technology. We're now at 85% plus is electronically recorded, which saves in time and labor and cost. Office supplies have gone way down. I mean, I think I've got $2,000 for office supplies, where it was tens of thousands of dollars in 2010. So there's been some effective uses of technology and that have allowed us to be able to turn over excess revenue. But I am researching with my fellow registers other options. I know there's some everybody's looking for a way to change that, and I know most of the fee offices have not had increased fees in forever, a long time. So,
Chairman Gooch, you had a question.
I'm just curious, do we know how much excess fees your department returns?
Monthly, it's down right now. I don't think any realtor or title company or anyone involved in the industry would deny right now that due to the increased interest rates, it has had an impact. So our revenue is significantly down from what it has been previously. But generally monthly, my excess fees were $100,000 a month. So, I mean, it's a significant amount. Mm-hmm. And that's after paying, that's everything else is paid for in the office. And the other side of it is the electronic data processing fund, which is restricted for the use of the office. It gathers more than we use, so we're looking for other ways. It is very strict. It has to be used for the duties of the office. If we can figure out how to make other things the duties of the office, we might could utilize some of those funds.
Commissioner Gooch, in 2022, the register turned over $2,412,401 in excess fees. $2,412,401. And as the register mentioned, and as you'll see when we get to planning and codes here in a minute, they are down a little bit this year, but that's just due to real estate sales and interest rates.
Do I hear any more questions, or do I hear a recommendation to change this mayor's recommendation? If not, we're going to also accept this as being approved by the committee. Thank you, Ms. Dahlberg. Next is planning and engineering.
Mr. Smith, could you explain a little bit about the fee office, why their budget is included in here and what we have to approve? Why do we have to approve anything since it's basically a self-funded office?
Yes, so if you're, as an elected official, you can be either an excess fee office or a fee in lieu of office. And I'll give you an example of kind of both. So the register is a great example of an excess fee office. And so that office can be self-sufficient completely. She could choose to do her own payroll if she would like. However, she lets the county process her payroll since we do that on a mass scale. So by doing that, we budget the Social Security, Medicare. It's easier on us to budget those in the county general fund, which she does turn money over to pay for that. So that's why you only see the Social Security, pension, Medicare things in the county general fund that you're looking at. We also run the insurance through that fund, so that's why you see that. I mean, I have, when I audited and worked for the comptroller's office in the past, I have seen a registry of deeds office in another county who did their own, and it tended to cost a little more. So this is a little cheaper way to do it, kind of economies of scale. And on the flip side, a fee in lieu of office, you take an office kind of like the sheriff's office. They don't generate enough fees to pay for their self. However, they're a constitutional officer as well. So you'll see their entire budget, and then you have another, the clerk and master's office. They choose to turn over all their fees every month. So they choose to let the county do everything. So that's why they're what's called a fee in lieu of office. So they just run everything through the county general fund, and they turn over everything every month. So really two ways to do it.
Doug?
Good evening, everyone. Doug DeMasi, County Planning Director, and Mike Hughes, County Engineer. We're happy to present our budget for planning and engineering to you tonight. You'll see that the budget did increase slightly, just under 8%. The major increases that you see beyond salaries and insurance and whatnot are line item 321, engineering services. You'll see that going from $0 to $50,000. That is for a traffic signal maintenance program that used to be handled by the city of Murfreesboro. However, they have asked us to begin doing that so that we don't have our own staff to do that, so that $50,000 would be with a contracted engineering firm for that. The other you see under 718 motor vehicles. You'll recall within the last few years we did have a lease program for vehicles. We do have 3 trucks for our department that were leased. This $27,000 is the remaining to purchase those 3 vehicles at the end of the lease term. Other than that, like I said, mostly everything is pretty much the same from last year. We do agree with the mayor's recommendation, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And if, Mike, you want to add any more on the engineering services? Okay.
Is there additional staff? Is there additional staff?
Not in this budget. In stormwater, which Mr. Hughes will present here in a moment, there is.
Thank you.
So there's about a $100,000 difference between your request and the mayor's. So
Yes.
what area was cut?
We actually had a position in this budget and a position in stormwater. The position in this budget was taken out, so the majority of that is reflected in that reduction, taking that position out.
What was the position you requested?
Excuse me. Mike Hughes, Rutherford County Engineer. We were asking for another engineer, an engineer in training. Yes, sir. To help with the tremendous growth we're seeing in the county.
And Mike, on your buyback program, where does that money come from? When you're buying back the houses on the flood, on FEMA?
Oh, yes, sir.
Where does that come out of?
Yes, sir. It comes out of the county's portion, you mean? Or, okay.
5%.
Yes, sir. Well, actually, it's, yes, sir, 12.5%. The FEMA pays 75, the state pays 12.5, and we pay 12.5. That will come out of the general fund. Yes, sir. Not in these budgets.
Well, if I could add, it can also come out of stormwater, correct?
Well, if we had
surplus there.
If we had surplus fees, we could bring it out of stormwater, or if we initiated a stormwater impact fee or a stormwater user fee like some of the municipalities have. So the city of Murfreesboro charges each resident $3.25 per month on their water bill, and that stormwater fee can be used for buybacks.
How many buybacks we had this year?
We have 3, 4, 5
What, you anticipate the same
Well,
next year?
these are actually from 2019 that are still just dragging along.
So we got about 5 a year.
We don't do it that often. These, like I said, these were holdovers from 2019 before the pandemic, and we're still struggling with those.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions on the planning and engineering budget before you? Since I hear no adjustments, we will consider the planning and engineering budget as approved and move to the next, which is stormwater.
Thank you. And in stormwater, we did ask for one additional person, and the mayor did recommend that we add that person. We are asking for a stormwater coordinator to help with our assistant county engineer cover all of these stormwater duties that they have to do. So coordination of the summer interns, the stream testing, the state permits that they have to do. So our thought was to be beneficial would be to free up my assistant county engineer, who wears 2 hats as assistant county engineer and also as a stormwater coordinator, have a coordinator come and relieve her of those duties so she can focus more on the growth in the county and reviewing plans and coordinate construction inspection. So that we thought that would be more frugal to hire a stormwater coordinator instead of a new engineer that we would have to train. So that's the big jump in our budget in 189. We went from 50,000 and some change to 114,000. And then the supplemental increases with insurance and benefits that goes along with it. But that's our big jump. It is an additional, all said and done, it's an additional, a little over $122,503 additional from the past budget year. But in correlation, it's our budget last year was only $325,000.
I recognize Mayor Carr.
So just a little clarification on the 2 positions that were coming out of this department, well, stormwater and then engineering. When they brought their budget, they did ask for both positions, and quite honestly, justifiably so, with the growth, and this, we've talked about this. But also, we're kind of in a bit of a pinch. And Mike and Doug and Sheila, they all worked well together, and I said, if you have to have one, which one would you have to have? And Mike said, I really need the stormwater. And so it was based on that understanding and the growth of that department that they've experienced with activity that the mayor recommends the stormwater. And it may be possible that when we come back in 24, 25, that we can add, based on the growth of the county, we can add that engineering position in. It's something certainly we'll be discussing and taking a look at. Because obviously, as this body well knows, this county is heavily dependent upon those departments. So that, just a little background. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And we do agree with the mayor's recommendation, just to be official.
Chairman, I have one more question for Doug.
Chairman, go ahead.
The county commission just passed for a year. Can you tell me how much money that could generate based on the 2023 number of 2022?
Yeah, now that's going to county commission later this week. It went through budget committee, the fee, so it'll be taken up later this week, so it hasn't been officially approved yet. I do believe, after looking at it, I think we would be generating an additional, $1 million or so, I think, million and a half, I think was right.
Yeah.
Based on 2022 numbers.
Yeah, just based on that, it looked like anywhere from $1 million to $1.5 million. And the reason it's not, the revenue is not included in the budget in front of you. If it passes Thursday night, then we will crunch the numbers and I'll get you an amended this budget in front of you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee for Ms. Hughes? Hearing no questions or recommendations, we're going to mark stormwater down as approved by our committee and move along to county buildings. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hughes.
Adam Dodd, Facilities Management. I accept the mayor's recommendations and will answer any questions that you might have.
Chairman,
Recognize, go ahead.
thank you. Could you, there's a number of lines, 335, 399, a number of other lines that seem to have pretty significant variances. Could you kind of go through the significant variance lines?
Okay, so the item lines basically indicate what is being purchased and what we're able to purchase out of those line items. So 335 would be materials and supplies for all the county buildings. 399 is contracted services, and that consists of mostly like state-regulated requirements that we have to follow for, just let me give you an example. It would be all our state elevator inspections for the county. That would be sprinkler systems, fire alarm monitoring, any ADS alarm monitoring. There's some x-ray fees that we have associated with the Judicial Center, elevator, state boiler permits, pest control, just things that are just regulated that we have to do every year falls under 399.
Would you mind running through the same scenario with 167?
167?
Maintenance personnel.
Well, I mean, that consists of just the number of employees and staff. How I break down the payroll?
I was just looking at the estimated end of the year was 639 or 636, 545, and you get.
Remember that number is through April, not end of the year. So
okay.
we got 2 more months on that.
And keep in mind, if for some reason he had an open position throughout the year for 2 months, you know, that could be down and maybe it's fully staffed next year. So with it being through April, if he would have had any position changes in that line, it may be a little less than what we have it next year, because we always budget for a full year, or every position being full.
You haven't added any new employees in this line item?
No.
And then your employee independent insurance was up about 70,000. Is that just due to the cost of the insurance, or have they opted into a different?
So we calculated, my office calculated the insurance amount, and so what we do is we pull everything. Of course, insurance is always an estimate because our insurance runs from January to December. So I know what every employee chooses as of today, but they could change during open enrollment for the next 6 months of the budget year. So we went off of what every employee had today, assuming they would keep that next year. And so somebody probably swapped insurances from last year to this year, maybe to family coverage from single or something like that, but that's how we pulled that number together.
Okay.
Adam, can you explain line 309?
Mr. Smith, will you take care of that?
So that line item right there, it is in Adam's budget, but that is line 309, contracts with government agencies. That's the money where we pay for the Civic Plaza and parking garage changes. And so this year, and we just had one the other night, we've had 2 budget amendments to pay for that. For a large sprinkler project is one of the major costs this year. I did reach out to the city's budget director, and then she gave me the amount So hopefully we don't have budget amendments next year, but that is how we came up with the $150,000 for next budget year, was based on the amount and the projects that they've given us.
So is that on that parking lot?
That's going to be on the parking garage under Civic Plaza and then Civic Plaza itself. And then this year they did the large sprinkler renovation. And then if you've been over to Civic Plaza, they've done some new railings around the fountain up there and had to fix some concrete work, I believe. And then also every year we pay a portion to maintain it for utilities, for watering, and for a portion of the maintenance personnel. I believe it's 31.5% of the cost to keep that up.
Any more questions for Mr. Dodd? Do I hear any recommendations? Chairman
Adam,
Phillips.
if you would, is there a real difference between maintenance and repairs and building improvements?
Yes.
Is there a real difference in those two?
You referring to 707?
Yeah, that's the building improvements, and then the maintenance and repairs is 335, I believe.
It's basically, and we've discussed the similarities just between ourselves, but so when 707 is what we would consider large projects in the county, like we have a huge piece of equipment go down, or like HVAC equipment, or we have a roof that needs repaired, that would come out of 707. Usually when we use those funds, those are projects that we bid.
When it's just typical every year maintenance to products.
I apologize, yes, that's typically everything that we'll do in-house, that won't go to bid.
Those items go up every year, almost have to, as we build and have more buildings. It just goes up every year. It's the cost of doing county business.
And I might add, as our buildings get older,
so do we.
Are there any other questions from the committee on county buildings? Do I hear a recommendation to make any changes? Okay, then we're going to go ahead and accept the county building mayor's recommendation and add that to our committee approval list. Thank you, Mr. Dodd. Next up is archives.
Hi, I'm Hillary Brown, Archives Assistant, and we agree with the mayor's budget. Any questions?
Chairman, could you give us a quick thumbnail of what this is?
Archives, we keep all the county records for the entire county, so we keep all the wills, marriage records, not all of them, only some of them. Divorce records once they're closed or finished or whatever. And we work with the other county departments with, if criminal court needs a record or whatever, we will bring it up to them, and we work closely with the courts and with the other county offices, like the county clerk and stuff.
Thank you.
This looks like pretty much a continuation budget to me, so. Any further questions for this young lady from the committee? Mr. Johnson.
It looks like the main increase is county administrative and then the assistants. Is that correct?
No, part of that was probably because, we're only however many months we are in the year.
Their only increase, they asked for no increases. Their only increase was due to the step increase, or their budget increased to $8,000, and that was only due to the step increases that's on the county's pay plan, and to the increased pension cost.
Okay. Any other questions? Or a recommendation to make any changes? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and add the archives budget to our approved list. Thank you very much. Next up is risk management. And also, before we let him go, we have a budget transfer that we'd like to take care of tonight. And you've probably got that on your desk somewhere, but we'll get our other business taken care of first.
I'm Ed Elam, Insurance and Risk Management Director for Rutherford County, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chairman, do you want to do this amendment first?
Let's go ahead and do his budget. Yeah, that's all right. Main question I've got, since I don't see somebody jumping forward, is how has or us losing the teachers affected this budget?
Well, glad you asked. One thing I will mention to you is sometimes when you break somebody down, you can be more efficient. But in my office, whether we're doing requests for proposals, going through the whole process, putting that out there, it takes just as much work for 1,500 employees or 2,000 employees as it does for 7,000 or 8,000 employees. So the efficiency with that, that doesn't change the work in my office. And, the schools are going to do, after 2024, they're going to do their own ancillaries. So my office will still be doing the ancillaries for Rutherford County. And again, that work is still the same, regardless of how many your rates change, depending on how many members you have in the plans. But the work doesn't change.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask,
Chairman,
thank you, building and contents insurance, 502.
Okay.
Is that about a doubling of?
Yeah, that is what was voted on at the Budget Committee last meeting. That shows the county's portion of the building and contents insurance and the liability insurance increases that you have for starting July 1.
So it's just increased premiums for us?
Rutherford County.
Rutherford County.
Mm-hmm. And to make sure I'm clear on this, that is not all of Rutherford County. There's a breakdown formula. There's the schools that gets the lion's share of it, but there's other departments that have a portion of this too.
So each fund, so you'll see also an increase in the highway fund, ambulance service fund, and solid waste fund, and the schools fund that we break down. So there'll be an increase in each of those. That's not the entire increase, but it's spread over multiple funds. I believe the increase this year was 113%. I'm looking at Ed because I think that's
property.
For property and casualty, the increase was 113%. And so we did call around several places. I did, Ed did, talked to as many consultants, and everybody's went up. I called some other counties to see if theirs went up, and theirs did as well.
And so that's a set fixed number.
Correct. And that is our premiums. That's what that number is.
And just so we can get on the record, line 508,
508, yes. That is the trustees' bond, and that is done every 4 years. Last year, we went to a crime liability policy, so the only one that was left that was not on that crime liability policy was the trustee, because his bond required so much. The limits that we would have needed didn't match up to every official that needed that crime liability limit, so we pulled the trustee out. So that's the difference. The $500 is filing the crime liability filing fees. And you will not see that corporate surety bond because it's a 4-year bond.
thank you.
Again, it looks like most of these is that insurance increase.
It is.
I'm saying. Any other questions from our committee? Hearing no questions or recommendations to make a change, we're also going to accept risk management's, the mayor's recommendation, and add that to our committee's approved list. And now,
Mr. Chairman, if I forgot to mention that I do concur with the mayor's recommendation.
I thought you said that when you started.
Did I?
You
I
didn't?
forgot. I did.
Okay. All right. Well, we have added you to our list of approval, but that could change in the future. Just keep that in mind. While have got you here, let's go ahead and look at your budget amendment request.
Yeah, so the budget request is to transfer out of other salaries and wages $5,000 into the part-time personnel to get to the end of the year.
Any questions for the director?
Move to approve,
Entertain a
Mr. Chair.
motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Who was the motion? I didn't. Thank you.
Second by Mr. Irving. Any further questions? Hearing none, call roll.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Rule 10? No. Okay, yes.
Sorry, what was your answer?
You don't have to. I don't.
What was your response? I'm sorry, what was your response? I heard you say Rule 10, then yes, then no. So, okay. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Mr. Sereno?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is the county clerk.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Kroll. I'm the Rutherford County Clerk, and I have met with the mayor, and I agree with his recommendation.
Lisa, how many employees do you have?
I currently have 40. I just hired 3. I'll have 2 vacant spots that I will fill once the Blackman office One Stop is occupied.
So when you open
It'll
up your
be
new
45.
center, how many people are you going to hire for that? Yeah, I know it's collective. I'm just saying that how many is that going to you need to hire just for opening that up?
Well, what I'm doing is I'm taking some of the staff from the Murfreesboro office, I'm taking some of the staff from the Smyrna office and putting them at the One Stop Blackman office. And then the new hires, I'll do the same. I'll put a few at the Blackman, well, a limited few at the Blackman, because it'll have a smaller staff. I'll put some in the Murfreesboro office, and I'll put some in the Smyrna office. So that way we have knowledge across. Not everybody's new at one location.
Lisa, the elimination of emissions testing, has that had any impact on your office at all?
Yes. The public, first of all, they agree and they're happy that it happened. So it brings in somewhat of a better attitude. We have seen an increase in vehicles coming in. Not a large amount, not as large as I expected, but yes, there has been. When it was eliminated during the pandemic, and for that short while, we didn't close. And as I was in the parking lot directing traffic during those months, I noticed cars coming through that hadn't been renewed in 10 years because they couldn't pass emissions. I've seen a lot coming through where they had been renewing maybe in another county. So it has had an impact on us, but in a positive way.
Way to determine how Rutherford County stands from a numerical perspective as it relates to wheel tax, where do we stand with other counties? Of the 95 counties, are we right in the middle or up at the top, or where are we?
The last time I'd done a survey, and that's been years ago, and it was when we eliminated the wheel tax decal itself. And at that time, we were just a little above the middle, but we were not the highest.
Kind of middle of the pack?
A little above the middle.
Mr. Piercy.
Do you have any idea the total revenue the wheel tax brings in?
I didn't bring that information with me. I apologize. He has it.
For last fiscal year, the wheel tax brought in $4 million in the general fund. It brought in $4,319,099 for the general fund, and I'll give you how much it brought in total because it is split between a couple different funds.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
And last year, the wheel tax brought in a little over, right about $14 million between all the funds. Because it is split between the county general fund, the highway fund, and education, which is split based on the ADA rate. The 85% goes to us. But education got approximately a little over $5 million last year. And we got 85% of that $5 million to our county school system.
Do you know how long it's been since it's been increased?
I do not know that.
It
off the top of
hasn't
my
been
head.
increased since I came into office, and that was in 2010.
Excuse me. Lisa, could you remind me, on your amended budget for postal, why did we amend that up so high?
We just had a high rate of postage that we did not expect. And some of that came from passports. For example, Smyrna had 95 passports in one day. And all of that has to be sent certified mail with only 6 per packet. So since that time, we've gotten a little bit of a better understanding on how to move forward. We now are on appointment only on passports, so that way we can better serve the public. And we won't see that huge increase all of a sudden. We'll have a better understanding of what we're looking at.
Was some of it because of mailing plates, or is that reimbursed by the?
That was also, but that ended in January, because that was from January to January.
Okay. I thought, why was I thinking that the post office took care of passports?
They process passports as well, but so does the county clerk's office.
Okay.
Smyrna, Murfreesboro, and as well as the One Stop Blackman office will do them as well.
Gotcha, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, is there a recommendation to make any change? Okay, we're going to go ahead and add the county clerk's request to our approved list and move on to GIS. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
I think it's the first time I've seen this guy in a suit, so I'm beginning to get worried about what he's asking for.
I have a rule. Anytime I ask for $1 million, I wear a suit. That's just that or up, anything. So Cody York, I'm with OIT, and after quite a bit of conversation and long process of explaining kind of what's going on with our budget, I am happy to accept the mayor's recommendation for the budget.
Michael traded out some paperwork for me, and all my notes on yours is on my other paperwork, so I got to dig it out here.
Is this only for GIS, or is this for both?
I can do both. We could have
Yeah, GIS is first, the way we have it on the agenda, if that's okay.
Anyone from the committee have a question to start off with?
What's the main thing on the 799 other capital outlay?
Yeah, that's the LiDAR. So this LiDAR, it's like radar, but instead with sound, it's with light. So this was, to refresh your memory, this was planned to be done last year, but after conversation with the mayor's office, he requested that it was in his recommendation to put it off a year. We talked to our customers and said, hey, can we put this off 1 year? It's a big expense. They said yes, but no more. It's got to be put off. It has to be done. We a growing county. The LiDAR is what lets planning, engineering. It gives them the information as things change so that they can make good decisions. So we put it off as long as we believed could be reasonable and could be responsible. So it's in the budget this year, and that's really the difference between last year's budget and this year's budget.
Is this part of the flyover, or what are we talking about specifically?
Yeah, it is a flyover, so planes fly over and shoot lasers down, basically. It sounds a lot crazier than it is, but shoots light down and then reads that light coming back.
Well, that's the elevations you're given to.
That's right. It's to judge the elevations.
Used to do that, once every 3 years or something like that? What's the frequency now?
We do LiDAR every 5 years, and so last year was the 5th year, and we kicked it. No, it's a contracted company. So we kicked it 1 year at request of the mayor's office at that point.
Was this satellite, just out of curiosity? You said it's not drone, it's not air.
No, it's a plane. It's a plane, okay. Aircraft, a manned aircraft.
Who are the main customers? I'm just curious.
I'm sorry?
Who are the main customers?
So CUD, CUD buys our data, so they buy data from us. Murfreesboro City has in the past bought data from us. And then we have, those are external customers. Then we have all the internal customers, planning, engineering, codes, all those people. And I think they are here, and if they need to speak to the importance of that, I'm sure they would.
No, that's fine. The data processing services, 317's bounced around a little bit.
All right, let me see.
Went from 7,000 to 41.
Oh, yeah. So that was an example, again, of last year in the mayor's recommended budget last year was, to remind everybody, at the last year's budget meeting, the mayor talked about how deep we cut our budget and how it would not be able to maintain that level. It was going to have to go up. So one of the things we did is, it was in our budget last year, the 40,000. What we do is we buy hours from True North, I believe, is typically the vendor that we use, and we use consulting services from them. That's a regular thing we do. The question that we were asked is, could we buy with leftover money from the previous budget? Could we buy hours that we could then use for last year's budget? So we said yes, we did that from savings from the previous year. So that expense went away last year, but it has come back because we don't have that savings this year. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Line item 333, license, is that your software, computer software license, or what are we talking about there?
It is, I believe, that's Esri. That's the software that the entire county uses, and it allows for the GIS maps to be presented on our website, so our citizens use it, and so that's the bulk of that call, almost all of it, really.
Majority of your increase is the LiDAR. I'm saying that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Basically our flyover. Any other questions from the committee?
Just one real quick one.
Chairman, go ahead, you're recognized.
Thank you. The cyber insurance, all that's covered through risk management, is that correct? You don't have any in your budget?
But so this is GIS's budget. We have significant expenses that are cybersecurity related, but we don't pay for the cybersecurity. That comes out of risk management's budget.
None of that insurance is in your budget?
That's correct.
Okay. Saw a significant increase in risk management budget, and part of that was that cyber insurance. That saw that go up quite a bit.
And the same logic that went up, that cybersecurity is a very important thing, and we all see this in the news, in the local news. That same logic that made that cyber insurance go up is also the same logic that a lot of our cybersecurity providers, those costs also went up significantly.
Kind of for my own information, our local hospital was shut down for, I don't mean shut down by serving patients, but their business operations were kind of sort of shut down for a number of days because of an attack. Do we learn things from that? Do we as a company, a county, learn things from situations like happened there?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. One of the problems in the cybersecurity space is people don't want to talk about it. And some of that is a reasonable understanding. You will not hear me talk about specifics when it comes to cybersecurity for obvious reasons in a public meeting. If any of you have specific questions, I'll be happy to talk to you. You can call me. We can set a meeting up. But for that same reason, a lot of people who suffer incidences a lot of times they will, if they pay the ransom, so let's assume this was a ransomware situation. If you pay the ransom, a lot of people don't even want that to be found out. So they want to pay the ransom quietly, get that done, recover the computers, try to clean things up without being publicly known. There are some problems with that. If you pay the ransom and the organization turns out to be on a terrorist list, a federal terrorist list, or organization that supports terrorism, you can then be fined for transferring funds to an organization that supports terrorist activity, which is a really bad, that's a really bad thing. You don't want to be doing that. And then even if you're an organization and it goes public that you have that, most of the time organizations don't want to talk about specifics because they are also in conversation with the cybersecurity insurance provider. And if they admit something, like, oh, well, we didn't do this, and that was what made us a little more vulnerable, the cyber insurance company will then refuse to pay. So often the Ed Elams and the Nick Christiansens, and possibly even the Cody Yorks, because the third option in there is you don't want to tell people where your sore spot is. If you have a hole in your armor, let's not talk about it. Let's just fix it and pretend it's never been there. So the Ed Elams and the Nick Christiansens and the Cody Yorks of these organizations will say, do not talk about this. Don't talk about specifics, just talk about generalities, and don't even talk about that if you can help it. So that actually creates an environment that's very hard to learn from these experiences because there's such pressure not to talk about the specifics. That can be overcome, but it can only be overcome by building strong relationships in the IT world, in the risk management world, so that I can have a conversation. For example, I have a very good friend that works for an international company in IT. I can have conversations with him about their situations, and I can learn from those situations, but all that's sitting around a table at my house. It's not in a meeting, so.
Mr. Commissioner, I can say that there's not a week that doesn't go by that the mayor's office doesn't have a conversation with the IT director or the risk management director about this very issue. It is the thing that we lose sleep over, literally. So I want you to know we're diligent and we're still worried.
So I'm trying not to talk about it. So do we have adequate enough insurance? I mean, there was two options and Ed Elam presented them to us, but I felt that we should be more. Do you feel that the number that we have for insurance is adequate?
I think that's a very complicated conversation. I'd love to spend some time with you talking
There it
about
is. I blew it again. Sorry. This is budget.
I do.
Got to pay for it.
Yeah.
I would like to address that on another level if I could, because that is an important question. The answer is yes, given the efforts and the cooperative efforts between OIT and risk management. That was part of that evaluation that we obviously can't go into details because of this format, but a private conversation may be appropriate if you're interested in that. But absolutely, our coverage is appropriate for the diligent efforts and cooperative efforts between OIT and risk management. But even still, it's not about insurance. It's almost about what happens afterwards, because it's the destruction to your systems that is the real problem and the reconstruction of those systems. So,
Feel confident that we're in good shape with what we got.
today I do, but that absolutely is a moving target. So we may come back in 2 or 3 months based on some new information, Commissioner, and say, you know what, the target's moved on us. We may need to make some changes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion with the budget before you? Do I hear any recommendations? Hearing none, we're going to go ahead and accept this budget as part of our approved budget and move to the next one, which is the IT.
So we also met several times on this budget, and I'm happy to announce that I am in agreement with the mayor's recommendation.
Mr. Chairman?
Recognize.
Thank you. Could you generally talk about, I guess, 121, 307, 317, and 709?
Okay, 121 is personnel. So we didn't have an increase in our personnel. We didn't have any new positions. There was some, I think that's a number you added, correct, Michael? 121?
I don't have an increase in 121.
Okay. Okay, and then 307?
307 is communication. So you'll notice a significant increase in 307. That is based on the moving of different expenses. So in the past, our telecommunication expenses have been kind of spread out among all the different departments. One of the problems with that, one of the risks with that, is it tends to be very difficult. These are complicated things, and with different people looking at different bills and invoices, it's very easy to not catch mistakes. So starting about 2-3 years ago, I requested from the mayor's office that all AT&T, Comcast, United, any of the telecommunications billing come through my office. So we were reviewing the bills. In doing that, we identified significant errors, misbillings, odd accounts, I mean, it's a myriad of problems. So after speaking with finance and meeting with them in the mayor's office, we decided it would be better to move all of those expenses into the OIT budget. And that would allow us to have a better kind of situational awareness about what's going on with all those bills, and we can catch mistakes better and make sure things are being done.
And if I could, let me chime in. It's just going back to Commissioner Harris's question earlier about cybersecurity. It's just not about controlling those expenses. We have to, as a county, have a single point of entry when any department wants to get access to our network, either through hardware or software. That we have to have a vetting point, because so much of cybersecurity has to do with prevention. And if we've got all these different departments purchasing their own hardware and their own software and putting it on our network, it opens up the door for just catastrophic consequences. So we're in the process of telling departments, if you want hardware or software, you got to go through Cody York's department to make sure that it's clean and safe before it gets on our network.
And that's not a hypothetical. We found circuits that were put on to our bill connected to our network that we did not request. Another employee of the county who, in my opinion, would not have authorization to do that. There was no budgeting made for those things. And, you know, AT&T is quite happy to just, okay, hook it up, and they'll start sending you the bill. Maybe a year later, they'll start sending you a bill that will reflect that. And, you know, those were the kinds of things we were seeing. So this was the only way, this was the best way, in my opinion, to be able to truly have a picture, a sight picture of what's going on with our telecommunications. It's obviously a big expense, so you want to catch that, but it is also a liability. And we literally go line by line through each bill every month.
And 317?
317 is data processing services. And it went down, because of so our budget is unlike some other departments' budgets. Ours, it's almost like you're at a zero sum you start with a brand new budget every year. Some of our contracts are multi-year contracts that some have yearly payments, some have one-time payments. So when you buy a big piece of software, it comes with 3 years free of maintenance, and then you have to pick up on the 4th year of maintenance agreement. You may pay that, excuse me, you may pay that for 2 or 3 years, and then that may be end of life for that piece of equipment, and then you make another big purchase, which then carries you for 2 or 3 years with no expense. And that's happening over, hundreds of different systems. So every year, our budget, we may be paying for something 1 year, not paying it for 2 more years, that comes back onto the budget. So there's a lot of that cyclical coming on and off of the budget.
Is that what's going on in 709 also?
That is a lot of what's going on in 709. There's also just increase in, 333 is licenses. So as we add employees, we add licenses for those people. Email, spam filter, antiviral software. We have all of these licenses kind of operating in the background that nobody pays attention to except us. And so every new employee is another suite of licenses for that person. So that's one of those costs that when you approve, a new employee, if they get a new computer, then that rolls into the replacement cost, puts that computer in a replacement cycle and all that stuff. So, so 333 is licenses. Also, we pull in, so it's our general practice that if a piece of software, if a software package is being used by multiple departments, so if it's being used by one department, they hold the cost for that because it's just for them. But once it becomes multiple departments, that cost comes to OIT. So this year, we actually are moving CityWorks and OnBase, which is a planning and engineering and codes tool, that's moving into our budget, that license. So we also had some just general increased costs and a couple of different things. But that's 333 licenses.
Thank you very much.
You need to get a better looking suit.
I'll look into that for next year.
There you go. There you go. No, I've had some discussions with Cody myself in the past years, and I would suggest those of you that have got questions about the cybersecurity especially, go talk to him on a one-on-one. And I agree with the mayor's statement. A lot of this has got to do with preparing yourself to defend yourself so you don't have this problem. And once you have the problem, that's another story entirely. Hopefully, we won't get to that point, but we've got a lot of things in place that I'm not even going to mention or start talking about, but come talk to him, and I think you'll realize that, maybe we can help him buy a new suit. I don't know, but anything we can do to keep from getting ourselves in a similar situation that Chairman Phillips mentioned a while ago, we need to do.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that Cody did bring or request that was not included that I want to make you aware of tonight for next year, and I think it's very important, and I want Cody to just spend 30 seconds on it, was the countywide network that we want to build out. If you would just briefly explain that, and just very briefly, if you don't mind, because I just want to plant the seed, because that goes to cybersecurity, it goes to independence, it goes to redundancy, and so many of the things that you're talking about. And just, if you would just very briefly just explain that so we can plant that seed, because we're going to talk a lot about that after July. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor. He says briefly because we have talked for hours about it. So as briefly as I can, I have recommended and presented a proposal that would connect all of our county buildings by a dark fiber network. So the county already owns, already operates a dark fiber network. We have a fiber ring downtown that connects 7 buildings downtown by fiber optics. All of our other buildings, all our other locations are connected by circuits that are provided by AT&T almost exclusively, Comcast a little bit. So those are monthly expenses that, as you can see, are pretty expensive. My proposal would be to contract with a company to do a long-term lease, 20-year lease of dark fiber that would connect all of our county buildings. That way we wouldn't stop paying monthly payments. It would be an upfront investment, but then it would also pay for itself. But quite honestly, the paying for itself is just a side benefit. It would also give us, it would add to our security, our physical security. It would add to our network security. Our bandwidth issues would basically go away. It would be as if you were on the other side of the county from another computer terminal, it would be as if you were sitting next to it functionally. It would be that fast. So it would allow for significant improvements in recovery if there were an incident that needed to be recovered from.
Just got one last question. So on Section 709, you requested a significant amount on equipment, and it was cut more than half. So what exactly were you asking for, and what exactly did you not get?
So so 709 is reflected with what we call special projects. So not all of 709, but that was cut. So these are projects that other departments have come to me and said, for example, hey, we want to add, we want to move the video surveillance system from the old system to the new system at Ag Extension campus. Or we want to move, a lot of them have to do with the physical security card readers. Hey, we want, we're using keys, but we want to get on the card reader system like the other buildings in the county. So, hey, can we do that? What would that cost? So we collect those requests throughout the year and then present them as part of the budget. So obviously, this is a budget year that is very tight budget year, obviously. So those special requests were an easy no. Does that make sense? Do what?
That is what you want.
Yeah.
That's what you want, but that's...
Yeah, and really it's what other people have asked me to do for them. Yeah. So I guess it would be other people's want list. Yeah.
And that's a good point, because in the past I've heard the term wants and needs, and we started off with all departments coming in at your last year's budgets. There was no discussion of wants at all. It was, tell me what you absolutely have to have so we can reset this year, so then we can grow over year 2, 3, and 4. So that was the logic there, Commissioner.
Any other questions from the committee? Do I hear a recommendation for any changes? Hearing none, we're going to add information technologies budget to our approved recommended budget.
Thank you, Chairman, Mayor, Committee. I'd love to talk to you anytime.
Okay, next up is pet adoption and welfare services.
Good evening. Michael Gregory, Director of Rutherford County Paws Animal Control. You have our budget request before you, and we do agree with the mayor's recommendation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding any specific line items for you.
Michael, are you adding any personnel?
The only thing that we asked to do in this was to add a small part-time position. What we're trying to do, our vet assistants seem to turn over fairly frequently. So what we're trying to do is to put a part-time position there, so it will help to cover some of those gaps while we're doing training, or also to be a kind of a farm system to where that part-time person would move straight into a full-time position. Other than that, that's the only personnel request.
I know we had numerous times you come and ask us for more money to make a job look better.
Yes, sir.
So how are we doing on veterinarians? I know that was a big problem for you.
Well, we do have our chief veterinarian that's been there with us for quite some time. The other position that we have open is just a regular veterinarian to come in to assist. We did make that offer back in, I believe that was February, if I recall. They did decline the offer. They were going to be moving from out of state, so they did decline it. But what it did at that time with us going ahead and reclassifying that position into that higher pay grade, it allowed us to post it at that higher pay grade. Of course, the 3.25% lift to the table will increase that again for next year. It's just going to be a very difficult position to hire.
Put it in your budget.
Yes, and this budget, and Chairman P., I failed to mention this as well. You'll see in line 189, that is where the veterinarians are paid for. There is an increase in that line. The current budget year, we only budgeted for that position for 6 months. This budget picks up the other 6 months and funds that new veterinarian position for the full 12 months. So I failed to mention that, and I'm sorry, sir.
That was the one that was on my list, so.
I apologize, I
Oh,
forgot
it's
that.
okay.
But we knew going into that veterinarian position that it was going to be very difficult. We had that posted, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I think, Sonia, and didn't get any applications then. So it was we knew it was going to be a long game to get somebody to come in.
Chairman Gooch.
Yeah, Mike, what line item does the doggone event come from?
That would come out of line 302, which is our advertising line item.
Very successful event.
It was. That was Gracie's, our PR person's, her first big event, and it's going to be an annual event.
How many animals did we adopt that day?
I think on the Saturday we adopted.
I heard 11, but
I was going to say 11 or 12, 13.
Yeah,
But then what it also did, though, was the advertisement from that got us adoptions on Friday, got us adoptions on Sunday, and then even carried over into Monday as well.
Yeah, I was back in where the dogs are, and this girl, she just could not make up her mind. So I made some suggestions.
There you go.
And I think she was going to come back and.
Good.
Okay, any more questions for Mr. Gregory? Did answer my last check mark that I had. Do I hear any recommendations from the committee or any further questions? Not, we're going to go ahead and write down the pet adoption and welfare services budget as approved by this committee. Thank you.
All right, thank you all.
Next up is the Solid Waste and Sanitation Fund.
Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Bishop Wagner. I'm the Solid Waste Director. I have met with the mayor, and I agree with his recommendation. Any questions?
So Bishop, your budget went down 902,000?
Yes, sir.
Hey, where did you cut that out of?
It was primarily in the, a little information here. My budget is split up into 6 general accounts. The primary account, the one that most of the funding comes out of, is the 55732. That's the convenience center account. And within the convenience center account, I did not request anything for building purchases or solid waste equipment.
So our goal back early on when we started renewing our convenience centers and improving them, does this mean we're going to stop since you didn't put any funds in this budget for any type of improvements or equipment?
I do have some funds that are in 55732 for some upkeep of buildings and maintenance. The overall scope of the 4 that we're working on, I'm a believer in finishing a project before we get into another one, and I've decided that we'll forego any large capital projects this year with some of the other things that we've got on our plate. And we'll come back after in another year. But there are funds that are there for asphalt improvement, building improvements, and so forth to try to bring some of our, and some lighting improvements to try to bring some of our centers up to speed.
So basically, the answer was yes, we're going to stop on the changes to make them, as it was referred to for a long time, like Williamson County.
Temporarily, yes, sir. Yes, for 1 year.
We're just, well, what you see on tab 3 and 4 is what we're looking at right now.
Yes, sir.
Why was this cut so much?
So I'm glad you asked that question. So we are going to go in a different direction with the way that we handle post-closure care and landfill maintenance. I've been approached by the contracted company, and they said they're not interested in pursuing and continuing their bid with us in the county, which was at a budgeted cost of around $450,000 through 2 accounts, through landfill operations and maintenance and post-closure care. So what I've decided to do is we're going to bring those activities in-house at an overall savings. I anticipate within 3 years we'll be at a net increase of up to $500,000 a year. I'm looking at $900,000 to the plus by the time we reach I believe it's the 26-27 budget year. Yes, sir.
Can you stop that?
Yes, sir.
That's a great job.
So let me chime in here. So Bishop and I talked a lot about that, and you're correct. So he believes he's got the people identified, the resources, and the equipment to bring that in-house. He believes he's got a thorough understanding of what that post-closure would mean. And so, of course, TDEC monitors every step of that for that purpose. And so there's just a tremendous savings to the county and doing, quite honestly, a better job.
Yeah, I believe on your first day we talked about that. So that's why I think that's a great move. I mean, good job.
Apologize, it's taken me so long to get that in action.
I think that's a great job. I mean, that was a lot of money.
When does their service agreement end?
It will be the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. You have the equipment in place to take care of it if we have a blowout the day after?
Not yet. Part of that money that's moved around. So the plan is it will take that second year. There's 3 things that we're going to need, right? We'll need manpower, equipment, and then I'll need soil to do the post-closure care activities. At that rate, that $450,000 a year, within 2 years, we should be able to start getting the soil and putting that soil on ground. Within the 3rd year, we should be reaching, and I've got an agreement with the state on a post-closure care plan and compliance plan to have have the soil paid for and have the landfill covered and seeded and strawed and ready for its post-closure justification. And after that, then everything that would happen in previous budgets would just be for maintenance of the landfill and operation of our brush control activities.
Okay.
On landfill operation and maintenance, that's a significant jump, so solid waste equipment, is that what you're talking about, what you just said?
Yes.
Buying that equipment, you put it in that account?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, on the maintenance, how many, where the lay broke, how many of them did we have this year?
We had one that was an NOV outbreak that was an NOV, and it's being managed now and handled in-house.
So we've had less than what we did the year before?
Yes, in fact, I've taken a staff member that off of the driving fleets. One of the things I do in this department is I try to make efficiencies, and what we were able to do through some of the infrastructure purchases that we made over the last year were, and continue to do with some of the things that we're continuing to bring forward with the way we manage our loads, the way that we handle ourselves on the convenience centers, et cetera, is to reduce the requirements. I don't want to get into a position where we just throw new driver positions at things and buy new trucks and keep those things up. So I'm trying to, we will eventually have to do that, I anticipate, but I want to try to do as much as we can with what we actually have by creating efficiencies. And in doing so, I've diverted one of our drivers to being the leachate collection driver. We've got a tank that we collect, and we take our material over to the city of Murfreesboro's wastewater treatment plant. And it has been a tremendous savings to the county. Now, we do have a minimum amount of money that remains to be budgeted for the on-site environmental company, the big tanker company that pumps out that pond when needed. But we've drastically reduced the requirements for that, and I want to keep them on just in case we have one of those real rare events where we just got to have them or we're going to have an outbreak.
Mr. Harris, that budget also has 3 new positions in it, that landfill budget. Yeah.
Well, correction, it has 2 new positions for landfill operations and 1 new position for convenience center.
What is it? Okay, so it's convenience center.
Is all the money that you've got in this budget for equipment in line 733? To replace our contractor with?
733 in the 55754 budget, sir? Or? Yes, yeah, that 400,000 that's listed in there is it should purchase a used 335 track hoe, articulated end dump, or equivalent, and a used front loader.
I was reading. Pardon me, what did you say?
I said it would be a used about a 735 size track hoe, front loader, and a off-road dump truck. Material to load and move dirt around the landfill.
No dozer?
I have a dozer, a 7T Caterpillar on site.
I, for one, agree with Chairman Harris. I'm kind of glad to see us end our maintenance agreement and pick this up and start doing it on our own. Any other questions from the committee? Bishop, is there anything else you want to point out to us?
I do have the purchase of one front load vehicle. It was something that was budgeted 2 years ago, and because of procurement issues, we weren't able to get it, and we ended up turning it into a couple roll-off trucks. I'm coming back for that one truck this year. It should be around the 400,000 mark, a little less. That's what we use to service the school pickups in some of the county buildings.
Which line item is that in?
It's in 55732 718. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a lot to look at there. I know it's asking a lot of our committee. One thing I want to mention, any of these things that we have talked about tonight, not just in Bishop's budget, but at any time in the future, we've got a busy schedule, but you may bring these back up. So if there's something you thought, well, I should have asked this, or, you definitely can. We're voting to approve this tonight, but you will have multiple chances to look at this again and change your mind or say where you're at. Having said that, are there any more questions for Bishop? Like I said, I know this is a lot of ground to cover on this particular budget. Hearing none, hearing no recommendations for a change, we're going to go ahead and accept the Solid Waste and Sanitation Fund. Those items covered under tabs 3 and 4 tonight as part of this committee's approval.
Thank you, Chairman.
Next is our debt service fund, one of my favorite topics.
Before we talk specifically about the debt service one, I want, if you'll flip to the summary page, it's going to be the page right after the budget calendar, right after your index. It's going to be the page at the top. It says estimated revenues from current property taxes. It's going to show how much the penny brings. I believe it's the 4th page in. So this is going to coincide with the debt service fund. So as you know, the schools said they were not going to request anything over maintenance of effort for their Fund 141. They also said they did not want to request any additional funding in their 177 fund in educational capital projects. So on that page right there, you will see the 2022 tax rate that we're currently under today. And then you will see a proposed rate, and the reason I've shown it that way is because I've went ahead and moved the pennies from the school that they did not request, and I have just shifted those to debt service. Now, of course, it's up to this body to move them where they want, but I've just shown them that way for illustration purposes. So with that being said, the mayor's recommended to put an additional almost 10.5 pennies into debt service, and a lot of that covers the $156 million that was just approved by this body last month. So with that being said, if you will flip to the next page, which is going to be the statement of proposed operations, which will show really the estimated revenues and the estimated appropriations for that fund. So with that, the revenues have increased, but also so did the expenditures, because we just agreed to borrow $156 million. The other thing that we have went ahead and included in the mayor's recommendation is the borrowing for a potential elementary school that the school system has told us for. This also includes a forensic center, the I-24 interchange project, and a potential transfer station. Now, the reason it shows a deficit there is because we budgeted for a full year of an elementary school bond payment, which we will not have. But that tries to get that fund back in line with our debt service requirements to help maintain our AAA bond rating. So I do anticipate, while that fund does show a budgeted deficit, I do not anticipate us ending in a deficit for that fund. With that being said, we estimated the cost of that borrowing, including the school's addition for the 3 high schools. We estimated that based on current interest rates. And of course, we won't know that exact interest rate of what we lock in at until we go borrow in the next couple months. And with that being said, is we plugged all of that estimate into interest and not principal. So as you look at the actual expenditures of the debt service fund, we plugged those amounts for interest for both county general and for school system and education. And that will be on tab, I believe it's 15. And so under 82210, 603, interest on bonds for general government, you'll notice we went up approximately $2 million in interest there. A lot of that we just plugged for an anticipation of increased borrowing there. And we went up from $15.5 million to a little over $27 million in interest. That's where we plugged, in anticipation of school debt that we will issue in the next 2 months for those high schools. Once we issue that debt and we know the exact breakdown between principal and interest, we will come back with an amendment to amend into the correct line item of principal, out of interest into principal.
The only thing I'd like to add to what Michael's done, he told you that he had moved the pennies from the school's request into debt service, and my personal request, since we've worked hard over the years to keep that fund up, I'd like to see that stay there. Of course, that's up to all of us, not just me, but that's my recommendation. I think that having a strong debt service fund is important. I think that's part of the reason we got our AAA bond rating, is because we showed a willingness to keep those funds fully funded. You know, a lot of these counties that are struggling aren't willing to do that. To the percent of money that we set aside as a rule, we did this many years ago, set that 15% in place. If you look, Michael gave me some information. I don't know, did you share that with the rest of them about these other counties?
I do not have it in there. I was going to talk about that percentage I gave you is for the general fund. But I mean, I can address that if you'd like.
We can wait. You're going to. But kind of some interesting figures when you compare us to similar counties in our area. But again, that's my recommendation would be to leave that 10 cents and the other amount into our debt service. Commissioner Gooch.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I agree also. So is it appropriate now or later to maybe make a motion or recommendation that we accept his funding source for debt service?
We can accept this recommendation tonight on the debt service. Do you need a vote on this one? This is not.
I think right now we're still under the mayor's recommendation because you're not actually voting on a tax rate or anything tonight.
But as far as moving the pennies,
I think you can, or you can do that when we vote on the tax rate. I'm looking at Mark because I'm not sure what they've done in past years.
Yeah, you can do it now, or you can wait till we present the tax rate as it is and do that.
Could that change? Because those pennies change a little bit?
Only if y'all direct us to. Only if you direct me to.
Okay.
I mean, the mayor has recommended it's shown this way as part of his recommendation. I have prepared, my office has prepared the debt schedules to make sure that all the debt's budgeted appropriately. And upon meeting with the mayor's requests and meeting with Dr. Sullivan, that this is going to be the mayor's request. And so if you vote tonight, we will leave them there. If you vote, you're still going to have to vote on the tax rate down the line. So, but it's either way is okay with us.
Well, I think I would feel comfortable, and I think the mayor and the chairman feels very strong about it. Now let's go ahead and make a motion that we move the 10 cents to debt service.
10.4.
Yes,
10.4 from the school, general purpose school fund, and their capital projects, 10.4 cents to debt service.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Sereno. Any discussion?
Is it, go ahead. Is it going to be perhaps more appropriate after we've heard the budget, et cetera, from the schools, especially with respect to capital education projects and those?
That's up to this committee. I can tell you I have seen the first draft of the school's budget. I do believe it'll be presented to their school board on Thursday night. And as I mentioned at Budget Committee last Thursday, their budget is balanced with this taken into account. So they have been the private act vests my office in setting local revenues, and so I have given them the local revenues that reflects these changes right here. And we still do with these changes, we still meet maintenance of effort as well.
And I think that if something drastically changes, we can go back and look at that. But I think to help give direction to the finance department and the mayor and so forth, that if we can go ahead and give our seal of approval right now, I think that'd be beneficial.
Chairman Harris.
I know they came in on the budget, the school board, but they always ask on capital projects, I think up to 11 cents. Are they asking that?
No,
And
so
can we take money from that fund?
we took 0.4 cents. We took almost half a penny out of that fund. So they did have 11 pennies in there, and they will now have 10.6 pennies in there. And that was what they requested of us. Correct. Now keep in mind, those are two separate funds, but yes, they do anticipate both of those being balanced.
Any other questions on the motion on the floor? Commissioner Irvin.
It seems premature. I'll just make that comment.
Any other discussion? We've got a second. Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
No.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Piercy?
No.
Commissioner Shrino?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-3.
Okay. And this is, again, this is something we can revisit between now and the end. It may be that all of us decide, hey, we may need to move this around a little bit. My personal opinion is not, but like I said, that could change too. All right. Do we need to go ahead and accept the mayor's recommendation on the debt service fund? Are there any other questions?
There's
from the
not a
commission?
mayor's recommendation, so we will need to vote on this one.
Okay.
The mayor does not make a recommendation on debt service.
All right. So there is no recommendation on the debt service fund. We just made a motion to change remove those pennies, but we do need a motion on the debt service fund itself.
What exactly is the motion you're asking for? I'm sorry.
To approve the debt service budget that you see before you.
Move to approve that, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion or questions?
Maybe an explanation of what we're voting on?
Michael?
So, kind of like I mentioned a minute ago, the debt service fund does include the movement of those pennies, so that increases the revenue of that. And then under tab 15, we have the revenue broken out by line item. So you will see an increase in property tax there. Also, all the other revenues are budgeted. You will also see an increase in investment income in that fund as well, due to our trustee's office bringing in a lot more investments. So those are the two major increases in revenue that we've budgeted. We did decrease school facilities tax a tiny bit because that is down. I just wanted to note that because that has trended down about 1 or 2% this year. But overall, the revenues in there would be $66,778,358. And then we budgeted per all of the debt currently issued. We budgeted that per the debt schedules, amortization schedules that we already have. And then I added an estimate for $248 million and I will break that down. That's for the $156 million that this body passed last month for the three high school additions. That's estimated an additional $60 million for an elementary school next year, an additional $6 million for the I-24 Buchanan, I believe is the name of that road, for the interchange project there, $6 million for a potential forensic center, and $20 million for a potential transfer station. Now, I want to clarify something. I just estimated based on current interest rates today. We did try to be conservative in that approach when we estimated that, and I plugged the increase yearly amount in debt service into the interest line, not principal, as I talked about a minute ago. And once, for example, once we issue the $156 million in debt in the next couple months, we will come back and amend this and move it out of the interest, the principal portion out of the interest line and down into the principal amount once we have that exact amount.
So to clarify, Mr. Chairman, if we vote on this motion, and everybody, you know, I have been against the transfer station, does that lock me in on this?
No.
It don't? Okay.
No. If this body does not wish to pursue, the only project this body has voted to pursue that we've budgeted is the three high school additions. So if next year the schools come with that elementary school, or they don't come, then we've budgeted conservatively, and you're trying to get that fund balance back up for debt service, where if you remember this year we budgeted $10 million. I believe the budget was a $10 million budget to deficit to start this year. I'm not saying that's where we'll end, but I believe that was the started deficit.
So we're basically providing guidance at this point.
No, you're budgeting on the budget of the revenue, the increased revenue that I just presented, and the increased expenditures already budgeted in there for that.
But you do have some estimates for the school that hadn't been approved yet. And
correct. What I didn't want, I wanted y'all to have options so that if this commission did wish to pursue that elementary school next year, that you had sufficient funding and debt service to do so.
Well, this will cover the what-ifs that we've got on the table right now. Now, if someone else came up and something else passed at the full commission, another large expenditure, that could change all this, and we'd have to come back and look at it. But he's trying to take into account everything that we've discussed up to now, even if it hasn't passed. You know, there's some serious chance that, for instance, the transfer station, for instance, the elementary school that he put in there, if he hadn't put those in there and we weren't expecting it, then you'd be saying, guys, what are we doing here?
Well, and we got the forensic center. We won't know on that till May 27th. So that's in there. So it's.
And I will say the largest impact to this is the $156 million for the high schools and the potential elementary school. That's why you notice the significant increase in interest for education there. County government increase very, very small because those projects are small relative to the overall debt that we currently hold.
So the forensic center, how much did you allocate for that?
$6 million.
If we get 17 million, which is what you're wanting, is that correct?
16, we're asking for 16,
Okay.
and excuse me, 8. We're asking for 16, and we're matching with 8. But of that 8, 2.5 is an in-kind for the land that we will donate in Smyrna. So our outlay is 5.5.
5.5?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When will we know the state contribution?
We're told May 27th.
Okay.
Now keep in mind, this is just like any other expenditure. If you don't approve this project, we just won't spend it. So at that point, it would give you the option. Mm-mm. So you are in no way voting on these projects tonight.
Any more questions?
Nor will this be the final vote that you'll have to make on this budget.
No, we're a long ways from that. We do have a motion and a second on this.
We have a motion and a
Mark.
second, yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions on this motion? Call roll, please.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
No.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Piercy?
No.
Commissioner Shrino?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-3.
Chairman P?
Yes, sir.
I've sat on this budget committee for 4 years. This makes my 5th year, and we've never moved pennies on the first night ever before. I feel like it was a little hasty. The reason I'm sitting here voting no on it.
I understand. Well, the only thing I can say, and I've had some discussions with Michael on this, we know that the money that we moved, that what, 10.4 cents, had to go somewhere. All right, now, for accounting purposes, he had to put it in a pot. The pot he chose to put it in was debt service. I happen to agree with that. So we would have seen it somewhere regardless. So it would, those pennies would have been moved somewhere just for accounting purposes. That doesn't mean that you can't move them back out and put them somewhere else. But that's why they were moved tonight. I don't think this was a rush to do anything. You know, I'm on the front end on how I feel about it. I think you probably knew that last year. I wasn't happy, you know, when we had to move money out of it, because we've really worked hard to keep that fund up, because that's what pays off our debt.
I agree, Mr. Chairman, and I think what I was just trying to accomplish is to have this committee give a blessing right now to what Mr. Smith is recommending. And again, it's like the chairman said, it can be changed. Anything can be changed moving forward, but that was just my intention, is to say, yes, this committee agrees with you. Or at least 4 of us do.
And let me clarify, we could have put that, I could have stuck those pennies in the general fund, and we would have still had to come up with some additional revenue to cover the $156 million that was approved last month. So it would have just shown a larger deficit. I just had to put it somewhere. And so I just picked debt service since they were coming from the schools, and this body borrowed the 156 for the schools. So.
And I don't think this is a surprise to the schools, because
No, the schools
Director Sullivan stated actually in the April meeting that we had, the April budget meeting, that that's what they needed in their budget and didn't want anything more than that.
So their budget going to their board Thursday night will reflect the decrease in property tax revenue for them.
All right, we're going to move on to, no, we have voted on that. We are going to move on now to the county commission's budget. Back under tab 2, first page. Michael or Mayor, which one of y'all going to do this one for us?
So let me flip to there's one small change this year, and that was because of the structure of this body. Now every committee has 8 members. So we reflected that change, and so you'll see in the 191 line item there's a increase there, and then we budget each of the other standing committees at 13 meetings instead of 12, just in case there's a special call. But that's an increase there for the 8th member of each committee, and then because we had an additional special called meeting this year due to the election, and there has been a lot of conversation about a potential special called meeting again in the future. We budgeted for 14 county commission meetings next year, and so that's why you see the additional, small additional increase in line 191 and 199. And then I have gotten this question about what the dues and memberships are. That did not change, but that is for the County Commissioners Association, for the Tennessee County Commissioners Association, and for the County Officials Association of Tennessee. Those types of things go in that line item, just to clarify.
Any questions? County Commission's budget. I think it's pretty straight out. Are there any recommendations for a change? Or any discussion? Hearing none, we're going to accept the County Commission's proposed budget and put it on our approved list. Next is County Mayor's budget.
I will say I concur with the mayor's budget.
So the first thing I want to point out is there is a new position in here. I believe, did it pass property management the other night? Did this position? So there was a project manager position that passed property management. It is also in the mayor's position recommendation in your book in the front section. That is added to line 189. Clarify that. I do want to talk about one or two other increases. There was an increase in 599. That's due to the vets center is now up and running in Rutherford County, over by the I don't know the road over there, over by the county archives building. We have it broke out in our Veteran Services Center. We have that broke out, but that is going really well. So there's an increase there of $15,000 to cover that specifically. That you won't see it on the sheet in front of you, but that money is specifically earmarked for the veterans. That increase, all of that increase is for the veterans and their additional cost there. The mayor's request does include for the lobbying again. I believe this body passed $100,000 back in the fall or winter. That was there. And then I do need to make a change to line 307. The mayor did not request additional $25,000 there for communications. That should be $2,500.
I'm proud to report that the mayor caught that error and consulted with the finance director in that regard. So it was a fat-fingered mistake.
On 399, is that where the contracted services were?
That's for the lobbying, yes, sir.
Is that for this last year, or is this looking forward to next year?
That would be for, the mayor's requested that to be in for next year.
Now, if we pass that in this budget, that would still have to be approved through the committee process, brought forward?
Be quite honest, I'm unsure of that, to be just real candid, because I've talked to Nick, and that is, we didn't have to do that last time because it's considered professional services. But I wanted to do it because of the special circumstances that it was under. I'm not opposed to doing that, but I don't, if I understand Nick correct, and I wish Nick were here to get clarification, but before we proceeded, we would get clarification from Nick on that to make sure. But the intent is still the same. The lobbying effort was obvious. We made some progress. We didn't make the progress we wanted, obviously, but I also, they've been invaluable the last 2 months because I asked them to pivot and ask for their assistance on the Forensic Center, and they've done well there. So there are a lot of things that we need better representation at in Nashville on a regular basis. I've said this before, if we're not now, we very soon will be the 4th largest county in the state. Every other county our size has representation in Nashville. Hamilton County does, Knox County, Davidson, Shelby, Williamson, Blount, several counties have representation in Nashville. And I just think it's so much of what goes on in Nashville, as we've all just experienced, is about relationships. And we all can't just run up there at the drop of a hat, unfortunately, and be present at a committee meeting or to go see a member about a relevant issue that's affecting our county. And so I genuinely, and having been up there 6 years, I can see the value in having somebody represent your interests up there, and so that's what this is about. It's not about any one issue, although there are several issues that come to mind.
Thank you. Any further discussion from anyone from the committee? Questions for the mayor or Michael, or any recommendations?
I would ask for a vote on this to reduce, since we would be changing that, the communications line item from 25,000 to 25.
I was going to ask if it was the mayor's recommendation that he decreased his budget by $22,500, and then we can just move on.
Well, since it was an honest mistake, yes. Just a fat finger mistake, the answer would be yes. The mayor's office does not need $25,000 in communication, and we are in a tight budget year, so I would make that request, yes.
So that would make the budget $1,376,377.
Read that number one more time, please.
$1,376,377.
Correct.
Make that recommendation.
Yeah, I think we can just go on as long as the mayor recommends that change. I don't know that there's a vote needed because it's his recommendation.
That is my recommendation.
We will not need a vote unless you want to change that.
Right.
Does anybody recommend any changes to the mayor's budget or any further discussion?
I'm a little confused on what Mayor just talked about. So,
Line 307 on page 2, it's the third line on page, at the top of page 2 is 25,000.
no, that's not that.
Is
That's
that-
what he was talking about earlier on other, I guess, lobbyists.
Lobbyists, that would be in line
399.
399.
399, okay, so.
113,200.
Okay, so is this reflective of 100,000 we gave you earlier?
This is for, the way I understand it, this is for $100,000 toward next year lobbyists.
You approved $100,000. That $100,000 of approval ends June 30th. You approved it this budget year. So if this body,
That's for another 100,000 in the budget, but it can't happen unless we approve it
Right.
on an amendment.
That's my understanding. Okay, are there any changes anyone would like to make to this proposed budget? Hearing no changes, we're going to give the Budget Committee's approval to the county mayor's proposed budget and move on to finance. Guess who's going to cover that one for us? There you go.
so I'm not requesting any new positions. Matter of fact, our budget has went down a little bit. The only change it's small change is office equipment went up a little bit. And that's we have a conference table that is taped together in my office.
Literally.
Literally taped together. And we have some furniture that's from the first finance director of the county that I would like to update. And so there's a $4,000 increase there. But our budget decreased overall by about almost $30,000.
Michael, there's no change in employees in your office.
No, the only change would be for employees is that Lisa, as you know, budget, we didn't know how long she was going to stay on, so we've reduced that amount needed. We do still have enough in there budgeted for her to help us with the audit if we need to. On an as-needed basis is kind of how we're using that now. So there's some flexibility there, but no new positions or anything.
Guys, a minute or two to look over that again.
The only other increase I will point out is our audit services. Now that's set by state statute. We did budget the state the 3% that they can raise that audit fee that is paid to the state comptroller's office. So that did go up. That's not my suggestion that goes up. That's just mandated by the state. But that is another increase in there.
Besides a desk with no tape holding it together, was there something else you needed that didn't make the request?
I think that's everything that we need that I can think of. I mean, we're a pretty frugal office.
You're doing a good job. Any questions from the committee, Chairman Gooch?
I just have something quickly under other business when we get there.
Okay, any further discussion on the finance director's budget? Hearing no changes or further discussion, we're going to add that to our committee's approved budgets. Now that moves us to other business, and we've already taken care of that budget transfer, so recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know we talked about the transfer station being 26 million, or
Transfer up, I believe it was 20. What was
20
the
million.
estimate?
And I know that the mayor has been working on that from the direction of the Public Works Committee. And I'm sensing maybe in a tight budget year, there could be some opposition to that. So what I don't think that the mayor needs permission, but if he wants it, I would make a motion, would like to see him engage with the city of Murfreesboro concerning their transfer station and how we could partner with them if possible, which would, I think, decrease the cost dramatically. And also, I'm just kind of concerned of duplication of services that would increase the cost. So, Mr. Mayor, what are your thoughts on that?
So I've had numerous, thank you, Commissioner, I've had numerous conversations with the city of Murfreesboro, and we were making some headway. And I don't think we quit making headway. It was the will of the Public Works Committee, specifically through the commission, the larger body, vis-a-vis the resolution authorizing us to do an engineering study and design for a transfer station not to exceed $200,000 at Landfield Road. And so I was specifically governed by the specifics of that resolution. And so that absolutely, this conversation came up in the course of a conversation on Public Works, and I wanted to abide by the will of the commission in that regard. I do not think the two are mutually exclusive, so if this body wills for me to re-engage specifically Darren Gore, who is leading that project from Murfreesboro, I'd be glad to do so because we can continue to pursue our design engineering as referenced in the resolution, and I can also find out from Mr. Gore exactly how soon they believe they're coming online, because I know they have just, I think they're looking at a budget of $17.5 million for their transfer station out on Butler Road. So I'm fine with both of those.
Okay, and I think that to spend the money, the engineering costs for Landfill Road, I think that's probably, yes, you need it, blessing from the county commission. But if you want a motion here in budget, I'd be happy to do it. But I would like for you to re-engage the city in any kind of a partnership or mutual working together with that. If that makes sense.
No, it does, and I'll be glad to do that. And I think it's on this particular issue, not many, but on this one, I think it is important that the commission and the mayor's office be of one accord. I do believe all of us, without exception, are trying to get up the same mountain of trash, if you will. And so some of us are just choosing different paths, but I do believe we're trying to solve the same problem. So if me meeting with City of Murfreesboro officials expedites that getting up that mountain, I'm all for it.
Well, yes, and I agree. I think that just what you would be doing would be a fact finding. What could we do? How could we partner together? You're not going to be making any decisions. You'll just be bringing that back, and I think it'd be worth discussion. Just to kind of see what we could do.
If there are no
I appreciate that.
If there are no objections from this committee, I'll be glad to re-engage them.
Commissioner Piercy.
I feel like that needs to come back to Public Works and be looked at.
Chairman Phillips, I think we need to go back to Public Works. I'm also on Public Works, and I have to concur with these two guys. I think that should come through that committee, then come to the full commission. I have no problem communicating with anybody. I think you don't ask the question, the answer is always no. But that doesn't mean that this committee, Public Works, which has been working on this quite a bit, would be ready to do that. Now, personally, I don't have a problem with you discussing with the city of Murfreesboro, but as far as negotiating.
Yeah, I think that anything that he comes back with would go to Public Works. I think that obviously, but I think to engage in conversation wouldn't be outside the realm of what Public Works is.
Let me just say this, there's no urgency here, so I'll get with Chairman Cush. We'll put this on the agenda. We'll have this for discussion, and I would imagine, I would be shocked if Public Works didn't make that as a recommendation. They might not, but I don't want to speak for them, but I guess we've heard from 3 members tonight, Commissioner Gooch, and I guess I want to respect the will of the body.
Any other discussion? Any new business or other business? Tanya, do you have something?
I may be wrong, but I think it's one of our commissioners' birthday tomorrow. Mr. Sherino, is tomorrow your birthday?
Yeah. Well, I don't have a good voice, so I'm not going to lead singing happy birthday to you, but I will congratulate you. Happy birthday, Commissioner. All right.
Would it be appropriate for him to tell his age?
Oh, we all think so. You don't have that many fingers and toes, or? Okay. There being no other business, we're adjourned.